the first part of the stroke, or you're talking about the end of the stroke. So it's not a real good term to actually use. Really, it's better to look at it and say it's about the progression of the curve. And if you look at it, pure hole pistons as overall will have more resistance and will have a real steep curve. And if there's more holes in the piston, it'll be more of a flat curve. And if you take the same hole in oil and everything, obviously, but since there's more holes, it's softer. But that's where there's people say more holes has more pack. It's because the initial curve relative is stiffer, because that's what gives it the flatter resistance curve. But the fewer holes actually, if on the dyno, when you look at it pressure wise, it's stiffer, but it has a progressive curve. But if you look at the charts, it's kind of hard to explain, and that's why different people say one will have the terminology of pack of being in the front side, and some people will be trying to say pack is the overall pressure. And so anyway, it just depends on how you look at it. But I've learned a lot looking through this. I think one of the biggest things that surprised me the most in the whole test was with the short strokes. I expected to see kind of the same linear thing. So what really surprised me was it's almost was the same pressure, whether I was running at 300 strokes per minute, or if I was running at 500 or 1,000. It really surprised me that the pressures were virtually the same across all those. And I guess it probably has something to do more with the bladder pressure in there, and the fact I was only doing a 10 millimeter stroke real fast. So I want to go back and do some more testing with the small chop stuff and try to see why the pressures were pretty much the same no matter what the RPMs were. So that was very, very surprising to me. So but the longer strokes and the progression, that made sense to me, and that's kind of what I expected. And I didn't know, but I was kind of surprised that the 8-hole piston and the 5-hole piston at 100 strokes were exactly the same. So I mean, that proves that with more holes there's actually more initial pressure for the number of holes in the oil. But the 8-hole never really is really never really stiffer than the 5-hole, but it has more of a flat curve. So so what does that mean? So really in the end, what that really means is if you want to use fewer hole pistons, if you've got more of a hard pack, or you got some big jumps and you're going to be taking some big hits, the fewer holes, it has more of a progressive curve to the oil resistance. So both hole pistons are about the same with the small chop, but when you take a big jump and you land and you hit, if you have fewer holes, it's less likely to bottom out. And that's one thing I've noticed with my 8-scale electric, and here we race on a hard packed clay track, and you'll break a lot of speed controllers if you slap really hard. And I've learned you just have to go with with a fewer hole piston to stop it from slapping, and that's what it'll do. And then the other reason you would want to use a piston with a lot more holes in it is it's going to use more of the suspension. So like on a real rough track, or a loose track with not very much traction or whatever, you would want to use a few more holes in the piston, and it'll go through that travel more. So I hope you find this information interesting, and you could use it, and all this stuff. You have to go back to the track, and you have to get your car on the track to find out exactly what piston, and through your setup and for all that, it's almost impossible to tell exactly what piston size and how many holes and what weight. It's and everybody has their own characteristics of how they like the car to handle. So that's something that every person has to go out, hit the track, and figure out what works for them. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.